Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners, or good afternoon, whenever you are listening to it. It is afternoon for me right now. It is around 4 o'clock here in suburban Chicago, so the sun is far to the west with the long shadows of autumn still here, although I guess we're not that far from the spring equinox, but late afternoon shadows nonetheless, and the weather is nice. I've still got my stocking cap hat on and a jacket, but no gloves, and I don't think I'll need them. So what a lovely day. I'm walking up to the library, so I'm going to be recording 2 episodes during my walk today. And I'll give you one today and one, Sunday, whenever. The one thing you can rely on this podcast is not having a regular publication schedule. You're welcome. So I thought that I would start today by talking about a few games I've played recently. Now, I know that I have talked about these a little bit off and on I talked about them in the Top of the Stack episode last time, but I realized I hadn't discussed them in detail, so I thought I would do that now. So without further ado, it's time for Top of the Stack, Triple Shot, Shooting from the Hip, Triple Shot. For those of you new to the podcast, Shooting from the Hip is the review segment where I talk a little bit about first impressions of games I've played once or twice. Shooting from the hip because I haven't thoroughly thought about how to review these games. I haven't played them enough to give them a proper review, so it's more of a first impressions kind of thing. Today, the 3 games I will be talking about are Grand Carnival, Dune Imperium, and Escape Tales: The Awakening. Now, I suppose it actually would be reasonable for me to do a full review of Escape Tales: The Awakening since I played the entire box, but I don't know what the heck. I'm calling it Shooting from the Hip anyway. It's more symmetrical. Plus, I don't think there's enough there to do a deep dive of it. I've only played it once, so there it is. Now, in the Top of the Stack episode that I did, I think 2 episodes back, or maybe this last episode, I did talk about these a little, so hopefully this is not too repetitive. All right, so the first game I want to talk about is Grand Carnival. I could have sworn I talked about Grand Carnival. Oh, I talked about Grand Carnival in the episode about learning games and patterns, but I will talk about it again more here. In Grand Carnival, each player is a carnival master, carnival owner, setting up the best 1920s style carnival for people to enjoy themselves. Your goal is to build a variety of different exhibits or stalls, usher people through your carnival promenade, and get them to the big top where they will earn you points by watching the big show. The game has a relatively simple play matrix that yields some really deep play. So the play matrix is that you have these 5 workers, and they're on these spaces numbered 1 through 5. And each turn you're going to play one of those workers, and the space that you take its number from gives you the power of that worker. So if you use the number 3 worker, it's a worker of power 3. And you can do a couple actions with it. One, you could buy a tile from the exhibit market, or the market of exhibits, which will allow you to then put something onto your board, and the higher power the worker, the bigger the tile, or the more choices for the tile that you get. The second option is you can move one of the visitors through your park, or a combination of both visitors, I think, and you do that by spending movement points based on which worker you took. And the third option is to, what is the third option? Well, there's a third option as well. And so the idea is what you're doing, you're developing your park, and then you're moving the visitors through them. Each time a visitor stops by one of your exhibits, they put a ticket on it. And so your goal is to have at least 1 ticket on every building that you have built. Any buildings that you don't have tickets on don't score anything at the end. They might as well not be on the board at all. This is a crucial rule that I screwed up, and as a result, my score was a lot lower than it should have been. This game is actually really fun. It is a relatively light game, easy to teach, but pretty deep in its gameplay experience. The game board is relatively simple. There's not too many choices in terms of, it's not a massive board, so there's a relatively constrained space where you're building your exhibit. It plays pretty quickly, maybe a half an hour for 2 players. When one of them is new, it took us about a half an hour to play, maybe 40 minutes. I would imagine this is a 20-25 minute game for 2 players who've played a couple times. What really stands out about the game is the art design. The art style would best be described as Fleischer Brothers Fleischer animation or Cuphead drawing style. It's a sort of 1920s animation style that really fits the theme very well and is replicated throughout the set. You have these different little meeples that represent your barkers, which is a point multiplication system that's part of the game where you add these people that move your pedestrians along faster and that sort of thing. Overall, Grand Carnival, it's really quite good. It's a little on the expensive side for what you get in the box, but it is a small press publisher, so I guess that's not very surprising. And well worth a try if you get a chance. That's Grand Carnival. The next game I want to talk about, I have to put a caveat on. This is Dune Imperium. Dune Imperium is one of the new hotness games. It came out last fall to much acclaim. It was one of several games that came out around the same time that purported to mix deck building and worker placement. One of the others was Dwellings of Eldervale, and the third one was Lost Ruins of Arnak. All three of these used some combination of worker placement and deck building to really interesting effect. So what to say about Dune Imperium? I thought it was interesting. I enjoyed my first play of it pretty well. I will say, the caveat is I played it on Tabletop Simulator. One of my friends has a copy, so that's my general goal or rule with Tabletop Simulator is I try to only play official DLC or ones where somebody at the digital table has a physical copy of the game. That's my line. And I really like the way that the game is structured. You have this interesting interplay between the different factions that you're doing and the cards that you're buying and the goals that you're pursuing in the game. On a first play, it's really hard to judge what the makeup of the cards coming into the market will be. And this, for me, was the biggest challenge, was there were a number of cards that I bought that I was hoping to combo that I just never got other cards that did that thing. And this would be one of those things where you sort of learn as you play a few times how likely it is that certain kinds of cards will come up. So, I mean, this is the consistent problem or complaint with deck builders in general is, on the one hand, you have a deck builder like Dominion where all the cards are available all the time, and then it feels a little scripted. On the other hand, you have a deck builder with a river like Ascension or Clank or most of them. I think most of them have settled on a randomized market rather than a locked-in market. But then you have the problem of the cards you need don't always come up when it's your turn, and when it's someone else's turn, they might come up and someone else might buy them then, and then you are winning or losing based on tactical play of which cards come up. And since you get locked on a path by buying cards, you end up in this position where you have made a choice about which cards to buy, and then the follow-on cards, which should be able to combo with your cards and allow you to accelerate, don't always come out. Now, like I said, this may be something that's easily ameliorated or twisted by skilled players, but for a first play, it felt like a problem to me. The board state part was really interesting. There are a variety of spaces that you can go to that advance your presence on certain tracks and allow you to fight over various resources. There's an awful lot going on, and I have a feeling it's the sort of thing where in face-to-face I would have been able to grasp it a little more easily, but on Tabletop Simulator it was just not the best. It also suffered from being dragged out. Tabletop Simulator, everything takes at least 20% longer to do. And so with 3 new players to a game, so the fourth player, the one who actually owned the physical copy, was the only one who had played before. The game took like 3.5 hours, and it should have taken like 2 hours. So that made the game drag a bit, and I think probably drained some of the fun. So I guess my initial impressions I didn't even talk about the theme. If you like Dune, this will be right up your alley. It fits the theme very well. All of the expectations you might have about the different factions and so on, they all work really well. No reason to think this would be anything but a success regarding the theme. So that's Dune Imperium. I definitely would be willing to give it a try again. I probably would, both on Tabletop Simulator or hopefully sometime soon in person. For now, though, it's not on my buy list. All right, that's Dune Imperium. The third game in my shooting from the hip triple shot today is Escape Tales: The Awakening. So Escape Tales is the third in a line, or is one of 3 in a line of escape room type games that carry the name Escape Tales. These are aimed at being a more adult experience. I don't mean sexy adult, I mean like just dealing with themes that are more complex and targeted for mature players. In this case, the basic plot is that you play a distraught father whose daughter has fallen into a coma, and you have to go into her dreams to try to get her out of the coma through some sort of magical journey. At first, that feels a little like a silly setup for an escape room game, but it actually works out pretty well. The game has a fair number of really interesting narrative choices that I think work really well. The pushing for a narrative choice is an interesting approach because, pushing for a narrative, the narrative side of it is really interesting. So you have to solve the puzzles to move from section to section. And each time you sort of dilly-dally in solving the puzzles, you have to take these Doom cards, and there's like 8 of them. If you get to the end of the Doom deck, then you're going to lose. So there's an element of balancing your choices. But I think some of the puzzles actually require you. I don't think you could get through the game without taking any. It's not like a game where you could take hints. There are puzzles where you literally need 5 pieces of information and you can only get 3 because you only have 3 of those action tokens. So it is a little forced, but as a result, then the narrative moves forward and you get to find out things. There are also some crucial choices at different parts of the game that make for the narrative, that push the narrative one direction or another and allow you to kind of have a interesting narrative resolution. There are several different endings that you can achieve, and so maybe one of the ways that this game would be replayable would be if you waited a while so you don't remember the puzzles exactly, and then you played again and tried for a better ending. That said, I don't think this is very replayable, just because, like most escape room games, it is a puzzle game, and once you've solved the puzzles, it's not going to be interesting to go try to do that again. So limited utility as a replay game. The art and design is solid in the game, easy to understand. Like Unlock, the game is somewhat limited by the size of the cards, but unlike Unlock, they don't really resort to tiny hidden numbers, which was the thing Unlock was doing for a while that I really didn't like. The puzzles engage in a variety of different things, although math is a bigger piece of this set of tools than in some of the other escape room games. So if you really don't like math, this might not be your cup of tea. And finally, the way that you solve the puzzles I really like. You have this website that you go to. They call it an app, but it's just a website. And when you go there, you punch in there. Each puzzle has a little icon in the corner. And when you go to solve the puzzle, you can click a thing to find out how many cards you need, so you could figure out, do you have all the cards you need for it, it's a nice twist, because you could be working on the puzzle for a while and then say like, wait, maybe we're having trouble with this, maybe we don't have everything we need, and you click it and they're like, oh yeah, we need 3 more cards. So that part's kind of nice. And then they have hints. There's 3 or 4 hints for each puzzle, and the 4th hint just tells you the answer. And then when you punch in the answer, it gives you the next cards to take. And one of the things I like about this one is that there's no penalty for taking the hints, and there's no penalty for getting the answers wrong. This game penalizes you for narrative choices you make, not for problems you have with the puzzles, which is a nice change. A lot of these games are about how quickly and how accurately you can solve the puzzles, and that's not the focus in Escape Tales. The last thing to comment about this game is that it is long. On the box it said, I think, 120 to 210 minutes or something. And that's right. It took us 3 90-minute sessions to play the game. That said, it's pretty easy to stop. They give you kind of a recommendation about how to store the cards so that you can play later. It's pretty easy to do. So we were able to stop twice without any problem and just pick it up later. And since the clues and the puzzles don't carry over from round to round, it doesn't even hurt for you to wait, a week between sessions. So that's our experience with this Escape Tales: The Awakening. I'd recommend. Really interesting, solid puzzle, solid escape game, quite enjoyable. So those are the 3 games that I've played recently and my thoughts on them. What have you been playing recently? Pop over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Finally, I also wanted to ask if you haven't been listening to Game Fight Show, our board game competition show in which we are sort of playing out a bracket of board games, please do. It's pretty fun. We'd love to have a few more listeners, and we have some really fun guests coming up that I'm sure you will be delighted to hear. So you can find those over at Board Game Geek, or you can find that by searching out Game Fight Show on Apple Podcasts, or if you go to rattleboxgames.com, there is a link to the Game Fight Show podcast. Thanks for joining me today. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.